Dawn found the pyre in ruins and the world remade. Ash lay in dunes among the charred trunks of the scrub trees, a gray sea broken by blackened spars of bone and wood. The air above the camp wavered with heat, carrying the reek of burned flesh and horse and the thin metallic tang of old blood. Wind worried the embers, lifting veils of sparks that burned out against a paling sky. To the east, the sun was still only a rim of molten brass, but its light spread over the red waste and turned every shard of charcoal to a blade. The Dothraki kept their distance from the ruin they had built. They stood in wary knots around the ring of abandoned wagons, their brown faces haggard, eyes red from smoke and what they had seen. Men who had not flinched to carve their names into flesh and blood were afraid now, as if the smoldering mound were the mouth of some god. They had watched their Khaleesi walk into the fire. Jorah Mormont had not moved since the night, or so it seemed. Soot streaked his jaw and clung to the soiled rings of his mail. He had drawn his sword against men who would have stopped her, had forced them back with the flat of his blade and the weight of his broken, rasping voice. Now he leaned on that same sword like a staff, breath ragged, eyes fixed on the place where he had last seen her shape outlined in the column of flame. A gust roused the ashes, drawing aside smoke that had clung stubborn as wool to the heart of the pyre. Jorah squinted, lifted a shaking hand to rub grit from his eyes, and saw movement where there should have been nothing but death. The mound had collapsed inward, its timbers devoured, its treasures melted and blackened. What had been Drogo and the slave woman and the horse and the 10 stone eggs given as a bride gift lay mingled now, bone to bone, as unrecognizable as dreams upon waking. Yet in the hollow at its center, where the heat shimmered thick as glass, something shifted. Ash slid from Daenerys Targaryen's shoulders as she rose. She was bare as the day she was born, ash smeared and streaked with soot, but her skin was unmarked. Her hair, once a pale cascade down her back, had been eaten by the fire. Only a shadow of white stubble bristled at her scalp. But her eyes were the same, amethyst, uncanny, wide with something that might have been awe or terror or both. Around her clung 10 small shapes, like shadows made solid. One perched on her shoulder, talons pricking skin. Another coiled about her neck like a living torque. Others nestled against her flanks and legs, crouched before her feet in a dark little crescent, clambered over the ribs of the pyre as if testing new wings. Smoke curled from their nostrils, thin as threads, and their scaled hides caught the newborn light. The largest was black. His wings were torn strips of night, his scales deep as coal, the ridges along his back the red of old embers. He turned his narrow head to glare at the ring of watchers, eyes molten gold, and let out a sound that was not yet a roar but promised one. A rasping, clicking trill that made the nearest blood riders flinch. Beside him, a green dragon with bronze markings snapped at flakes of drifting ash. A white one with pale gold eyes shook soot from his wings. The others bore colors enough to shame a prince's standard hall. Copper and cream, silver and blue, brown as old leather with eyes like molten amber, a red so dark it bordered on purple. 10 hatchlings, 10 coils of living fire, each no larger than a cat, each clinging to the slight figure at the heart of the ruin. Daenerys stood amid the ashes of her life, and fire loved her. Jorah heard someone whisper a word, low and fearful. "Maggie!" "No," he rasped, his own voice rough in his throat. "No, Maggie. Khaleesi." He took a step forward, then another, his boots sinking into hot ash, feeling the heat through the cracked leather. The air tasted like smoke and iron and some sharp, wild thing that set the hairs on his arms to rising. "Your Grace," he said, and went down on one knee because his legs had lost all strength. She turned to him, and when she smiled, the world felt as if it had tilted. "They are mine," she said. Her voice shook, but not with fear. The black dragon tightened his grip on her shoulder at the sound, smoke wisping from his nostrils as if answering. They are my children. Children, 10 of them, where no dragon had been seen in the world for more than a century. 10 where all the wisdom of maesters and kings would have sworn none. Dothraki hooves rustled behind Yora as more of her people crept closer, drawn despite their terror. Rikaro's eyes shone like a boy's. Ago's knuckles were white on his arak. Old Jogo looked between the dragons and the woman they encircled, as if trying to decide which was more impossible. Kalaka, Rikaro breathed. Kalaka of flame. Kal Raymar, another muttered. A name from some old tale of a fire god's avatar. The Dothraki were not a people of books, but stories clung to them like dust. A woman who walked unburned from a pyre with 10 dragons clinging to her skin fit every myth and none at once. Daenerys heard them and felt their fear as a wind around her. The dragon's claws bit into her flesh with each shift, but the pain seemed distant. Her body hummed with warmth that was not only the fire's, as if something vital had been stirred awake in her blood. She should have been dead. She knew that as certainly as she knew her name. She had felt the fire catch the silk of her dress, the heat closing over her, the sudden fierce sweetness of it as if she were sinking into a scalding bath. She remembered the crack of hatching shell, over and over like thunder in a storm. She remembered the flash of images in the flames, her brother screaming as molten gold devoured him, a shadow of a great red dragon coiling around a black iron throne, a wall of ice under harsh stars. She had walked through it, all of it, and emerged on the shore of burning. She had gone into the pyre as Daenerys Stormborn, the last lost daughter of a broken house, a widowed Khaleesi with only a handful of followers. She had come out as something else. She lifted her head, ash drifting from her lashes, and looked at the ring of her people. Men who had called her Khaleesi, then abandoned her when her husband fell, stood at the edges of the camp, wary as wolves who scented a larger predator. Those who had stayed knelt now, one by one, as if some invisible hand pressed upon their shoulders. "Blood of my blood," Yora said hoarsely. The words did not belong to him, yet he spoke them. "Khaleesi, my queen, queen." The words settled over her like a cloak. She thought of the red door in Bravos, of her brother's hand biting into her arm as he hissed of the throne that had been stolen from them, of the whispered histories of fire and blood. She thought of the child she had lost, the child promised in the witch's broken, lying words, a stallion who would mount the world, and understood, with a clarity sharp as glass, that this was no stallion. This was a sky full of wings. "I am Daenerys of House Targaryen," she said, her voice carrying over the ashes, over the whispers. "Daughter of King Aerys, the dragon. I am Khaleesi of the great grass sea. I am the mother of dragons." 10 small heads lifted at the sound of that last word, as if in recognition. Heat shimmered around them. "And I will take what is mine," she went on. With fire and blood, the black dragon spread his wings. Even half-grown as they were, they cast a jagged shadow over her, over the bones of a dead Khal. The rising sun caught the edges of their thin membranes, turning them translucent as stained glass. A murmur moved through the camp, a sound like dry leaves. Fear, awe, the rough rasp of ambitions being reshaped in men's chests. The Dothraki understood strength. They worshipped it in all its forms, from the cut of a sword to the swell of a stallion's muscles. There was strength here now that no Khal had ever offered. Yora bowed his head till his forehead touched the ash. "Your Grace," he said again, more softly, "there are no more dragons in the world but yours." She looked at him, at the ruins, at the wide, pitiless sky, and felt something new take root behind her ribs. "Then the world," Daenerys said, "is mine to change." The days that followed burned themselves into memory, as the heat of that first dawn had burned itself into her bones. They crossed the red waste in a thin, ragged line, their horses gaunt, their water skins light. Yet where another Khalasar might have dwindled and died under that merciless sky, hers endured because they did not ride alone. The dragons learned to fly in the waste. At first they could only glide, flinging themselves awkwardly from her arms or from the back of some boulder and flapping frantically to slow their fall. They tumbled more than soared, hissing and indignant when they crashed into the sand. But each day they grew, scales hardening and darkening, wings broadening, bones sharpening beneath leathery skin. Drogon, the Black, was boldest, quickest to fling himself into the hot wind. He would clamber up the side of a wagon or a half-dead tree, pause only long enough to glance back at her as if to be sure she watched, then hurl himself outward with a shriek that made the horses shy. His wings beat in ragged, rhythmic bursts, sending gusts of hot air down over the camp, and sometimes he managed to wheel in an uneven circle before landing in a spray of sand. Regal, green and bronze, was less reckless but more precise. He studied, if a dragon could be said to study. His golden eyes tracked Drogon's attempts, and when he leapt, his path was smoother, his landings less disastrous. Viserion, pale and vain, liked to bask in the sun more than push his wings, but he could cling to the top of a swaying pole and ride its motion with uncanny balance. The others, Meraxes with her silvery gray scales and black-tipped wings, Little Vagger the brown, Vermithor burnished copper, Pale Syrax with eyes like new-minted coins, Caraxes deep red with long lean limbs, and two smaller unnamed hatchlings whose colors had not yet settled, tumbled after their bolder brothers or sisters, scuffling and snapping. They were all teeth and curiosity and fire. Fire fed them. At first, she fed them slivers of charred meat, holding it in gloved fingers while they tore with needle teeth, rumbling low as cats at cream. Later they learned to sear their own prey, small lizards and birds they flushed from scrub, charring flesh with short, sharp gouts of flame that left the ground smoking. The Dothraki began to give them names of their own. Stormwing, one man called Drogon. Ashfang, murmured another when Caraxes tore a desert viper apart. The women clucked their tongues and muttered prayers to strange gods, but they scraped dragon scat from the wagons all the same, and their children watched with wide eyes as the creatures fought and tumbled, playing at war in the sand. Fear had not gone. Men flinched when a dragon swooped low, when a careless lash of tail drew blood. Yet fear was not always an enemy. It was a bridle, a bit in the mouth of their unruly world. At night, Daenerys lay under the open sky, wrapped in a thin blanket, the dragons a warm weight upon and around her. They arranged themselves as they pleased. Sometimes Drogon sprawled across her chest like a black cat, his slow breath gusting embers, while Viserion wrapped his pale length across her thighs and Regal nested in the crook of her arm. The smaller ones curled wherever they found warmth. In her hair, beneath her neck, against the hollow of her stomach. Their hearts beat quickly, a rapid, fierce flutter. When they dreamed, tiny tongues of fire licked from their mouths, and smock. He threaded through her sleep. Her dreams changed. She dreamt of cities from above, their streets a web of fire beneath her, roofs splitting and running molten under the wash of her dragon's breath. She dreamt of seas as seen from the vantage of the clouds, ships no more than toys upon the glittering surface, and 10 shadows sweeping over them to leave charred wreckage in their wake. She dreamt of a throne of black iron melting like wax, pouring down into rivers of red that flowed through a city of pale stone. Not all her dreams were of destruction. Some showed fields unburned, green and heavy with grain, dragon shadows sliding over them without touching. Others showed chained men breaking their own bonds and standing straight beneath banners they had once been forbidden to touch, banners of black and red and 10 stars. She spoke of these dreams to no one. They reached Karth half dead, but they reached it. The great gates rose from the desert like something out of a fever dream, painted in riotous colors, studded with jewels and gold, carved with scenes of men and women and beasts twining. They were as far from the bare wooden gates of a Dothraki camp as the Red Waste was from the green lands her brother had promised. The warlocks and merchant princes debated long that day whether to open to her. She watched their shadows pass behind jeweled screens, heard echoes of argument carried faintly through the stone. Her people sagged in their saddles, lips cracked, eyes sunken, while the dragons paced restlessly under the gate's shadow. When at last the gates creaked open a hand's span, a delegation emerged, arrayed like exotic birds. Xaro Zoan Daxos walked at their head, arms spread, rings winking on his dark fingers, smile wide. "We have considered Khaleesi," he called in the common tongue. His gaze slid past her to the dragons on their perches and faltered for the space of a heartbeat before he made it charming again. "We have decided. The 13 will." A shrill cry cut him off. One of the smaller dragons had taken to wing, emboldened by the high walls. It swooped low, just above the heads of the Carthene, spiraling in a clumsy arc that nonetheless sent them ducking and shrieking. A burst of flame escaped it, more reflex than malice, and licked harmlessly over polished stone. But a few sparks caught in the feathered headpiece of a merchant prince, which promptly began to smolder. Panic broke the delegation's careful composure. Men flapped at their smoking finery. A woman shrieked as a dragon's tail brushed her cheek, leaving a light, smoking scratch. Zaro, Zoe, and Daxos stood very still, throat working, as the black dragon settled upon the wall above Daenerys, spreading his wings so their shadow fell over the gate, over the parched faces of her people. "You have decided?" Daenerys said. Her voice was hoarse from thirst, but it carried. Ash dusted her shoulders and arms even now. Dragon claws had left faint scars that traced white along her skin. "Then hear my decision." All eyes swung back to her. The dragons quieted. 10 narrow heads turned, tongues tasting the air. "I offer you what no other can," she said. "Trade, wealth, stories to make Kartha's name echo from one end of the world to the other. I offer you dragons." Gasps, murmurs. Zaro's eyes glittered, greed warring with fear. "In return I ask food, water, shelter," she went on. "I ask ships to carry me and mine across the Great Salt Sea when the time comes. I ask you to treat my people as guests, not slaves." Her gaze sharpened. She let it rest on each of the 13 in turn. "But understand this, if you bar your gates to me, you bar them to my dragons. And they do not turn aside so easily." Drogon hissed as if on cue. Smoke curled from his nostrils, drifting down in lazy ribbons. Zaro swallowed. His smile returned, brittle as sugar glass. "Khaleesi," he said, "Karth would never turn away such wonders. You and your... I see 10 now, 10 noble beasts are welcome within our walls. Karth opens its arms." Karth opened more than its arms. Doors that would have remained shut to a war-weary widow swung wide at the sight of 10 dragons perched above her like a living crown. Merchants whose hearts beat in time with the chink of coin hurried to offer her jewels and silks and strange delicacies, hoping to buy favor with the mother of monsters. The pureborn debated whether her presence fulfilled or violated some prophecy in their dust-choked scrolls. The warlocks of the House of the Undying whispered among themselves and sent pale servants to invite her to witness their secrets. She saw the hunger in their eyes when they looked at the dragons, the calculating gleam, the way certain men's gazes weighed each tooth and claw as if imagining them chained in their own vaults, bred and bled for profit. She saw and she smiled, and she let them think her younger than her years. She visited the House of the Undying. She went armed not with swords but with fire. Drogon coiled around her shoulders like a cloak. Regal and Viserion flanked her, claws pricking as they clung to leather. The others stayed behind with her blood riders, restless and snarling at the warlock's scent. She walked through blue shadow and whispering corridors with dragon's breath warming her neck, and when the visions came, the throne room flooded, a city in ashes, a wall out of the north so high it scraped the sky. She saw them in a fractured way, like reflections in rippling water, and the dragon's heat anchored her. The warlocks tried their tricks. The illusions warped and closed like fists around her, doors vanishing, corridors doubling back upon themselves. Thin voices whispered promises and threats in a dozen tongues. She heard her brother calling from one room, begging, threatening. She smelled smoke that was not her dragon's and heard the distant roar of a crowd, the clang of bells. She walked on. The dragons spat fire when ghostly hands reached for her. Illusions burned and dissolved, leaving behind only pale, shriveled men whose blue lips cracked in horror as their precious house caught. She burned the heart of the Undying and left it smoking, the dragons shrieking triumph as they wheeled in the smoke above the ruin. Word spread. By the time she sailed from Karth, the tales had gone before her like heralds. a girl who walked through fire, a widow who burned a city's dark heart and left 10 dragons screaming over its walls, a Targaryen with a clutch to rival Aegon's. She left richer than she had arrived. Gold and silk and spices filled the holds of the ships Zaro donated with careful ostentation. More precious were the men and women who chose to go with her. Sellswords who had seen dragons destroy stone, merchants who scented a new market in whatever lands she would conquer, freedmen who had known nothing but Carthene cages and saw in her a path to something else. She sailed west. The sea was a restless blue expanse, its swells lifting and dropping the ships like toys. The dragons took to it as they had taken to the waste, warily at first, then with increasing boldness. They perched on masts and spars, claws dug into tarred wood, wings spread to catch the wind. They chased gulls, their shrill cries answering the birds' harsh calls. Sometimes they dove at the waves, sending up fans of water that smoked when dragonfire met salt. Daenerys stood at the prow of the flagship and watched them. The wind whipped the stubble of her hair and tugged the rough cloth of her borrowed garments. The sea's breath was salt and cold, so different from the baked, suffocating air of the desert that she felt as if she had stepped onto another world entirely. Behind her, footsteps. She did not need to turn to know them. "You should rest, your grace," Yora said quietly. "You have not slept since the last of the warlocks burned," she finished for him. "I sleep enough." She watched Drogon dive after something in the waves, surface with a writhing flash of silver in his jaws, and shake his head until the fish went limp. "There is so much to see. Essos will not vanish if you close your eyes," Yora said wryly, "though it may be a quieter place for it." She smiled despite herself. "You disapprove." "I fear," he corrected gently. 10 dragons would make any man cautious." He glanced up at the circling shapes, the way their shadows dappled the deck. "Illyrio once told me he had 3 eggs, relics more precious than all the jewels in his vault. He never said where he found the others. Perhaps he lied about their number," she said. "Perhaps he favored my brother with fewer," her mouth twisted. "Or perhaps they simply woke in my fire because they chose to. Who can say why the wind blows, Ser Yora? Maesters would say much," he muttered. "And all of it foolish." He hesitated. "What will you do with them, your grace?" She tilted her head. "With my children? With your dragons," he said. "With their power. You speak of taking what is yours. I do not doubt they can win you a throne. But thrones are only chairs men fight to die upon. Once you sit, what then?" The question pricked her like a thrown dart. She thought of Viserys. So consumed by the thought of a chair, he had never seen that he had forgotten the people he meant to rule. She thought of her father, who had burned men with wildfire in the name of a kingdom he had already lost. "What then?" she echoed softly. She looked west. Beyond that horizon lay Slaver's Bay. If all the charts and tales were true, cities built on chains, men bought and sold like cattle, dreams cut to fit someone else's ledger. "Then we break what should never have been forged," she said. "We unmake some chains. We make others of a different sort." "Others?" Yora's brows drew together. "Laws," she said. "Vows. Oaths binding lord to lowborn, king to subject. I am tired of men who believe their blood alone entitles them to rule. I will not be my father, Ser Yora. I will not be my brother." Her hand tightened on the rail until her knuckles whitened. "If I must be a queen, I will be a different kind." His eyes searched her face. In them she saw worry, loyalty, something like reverence tangled with concern. "You speak of breaking chains," he said. "We sail toward a shore full of them." "Yes," she said, "and I have 10 dragons." The first sight of Astapor was white walls and red banners and men in chains. She stood at the prow again as the city's shape swelled on the horizon. The harbors were choked with ships and the long black shadows of slave galleys. The sea breeze brought the faint smell of tar, rot, unwashed flesh. Above the walls, pale towers thrust into the sky like bony fingers. "Lovely," Yora muttered behind her. in the way of a sword to the gut. On the walls, bells clanged in alarm. Men pointed. The dragons wheeled above the ships, black and green and pale gold against the blue sky, their cries strange and wild. One dove low over the water, wingtips slicing the surface, sending up twin trains of spray. Panic rippled across the harbor. Small boats turned in clumsy circles, men shouting, oars colliding. "Good," Daenerys said. "Let them be afraid." They received her in the Plaza of Punishment, beneath the eyes of nailed men. The Unsullied stood in even ranks, spears grounded before them, blank faces turned toward their master's guests. They smelled of salt and iron and old blood. Behind them, the slavers' red brick houses rose, their balconies crowded with curious eyes. Krasny's Emonaklas was a thick-lipped man who had sweat poorly. He preened and spat and insulted her in High Valyrian, thinking her ignorant. Missandei translated, voice smooth as still water, omitting the worst of it. When he spoke of the Unsullied's discipline, Daenerys watched the soldiers' eyes. When he boasted of their bravery, she watched their scars. When he described how their masters cut away their names and their manhoods, how they were made to slay newborn babes to prove their obedience, she watched their hands. The dragons watched too. Drogon coiled around her shoulders, quiet but hot. Regal and Viserion flanked her feet, claws skittering on the baked brick of the plaza. The others perched along the low wall behind her, snorting smoke, restless. "I would buy them all," she said when he finished. "Every Unsullied in Astapor." The slaver laughed. The sound was harsh, incredulous. "Khaleesi," Missandei murmured. "He says you have a queen's dreams and a pouch lighter than a dockside whore's virtue." Daenerys smiled. "Ask him what he would take," she said. "Anything, everything. Name his price." Krasny's named it. Gold, gems, ships, hostages, her own body if he could get it. He sneered as he spoke, hands flicking, eyes lingering on her bare scalp, on the dragons with mingled greed and unease. 10 dragons made his tongue bold, for he assumed no woman would part with them. When he named dragons among the things he wanted, the plaza seemed to still. Even the nailed men overhead, caught forever in the moment of their death, seemed to listen. Missandei flinched. Jorah hissed soft warning between his teeth. "Tell him," Daenerys said, "that if I gave him one dragon, even a hatchling, he would have more power than any man in this city has dreamt. Tell him that 10 is beyond counting." Missandei translated. Krasny's licked his lips, eyes darting to the nearest dragon. Mare axes, perched on the wall. She hissed at him, smoke curling from her speckled nostrils. He named a new price, all the Unsullied in Astapor in exchange for 8 of her dragons. He would let her keep the black and the pale and one other, perhaps, as breeding stock. His eyes gleamed as he spoke of chains of iron and chains of fire, of dragon legions marching behind unsleeping phalanxes. 8, Daenerys repeated. She laid a hand on Drogon's neck. He stiffened under her fingers, scales rasping softly. "Tell him I agree." Jorah's hiss sharpened to a strangled exclamation. Even Missandei's composure cracked. Her eyes flew to Daenerys' face in open alarm. The plaza erupted in delighted, disbelieving murmurs. "Khaleesi," Jorah began. She did not look at him. "You called me your queen, Ser Jorah," she said. "Trust that I know the worth of my children." Her gaze stayed on Krasny's. "Tell him that in 3 days' time we will exchange 8 dragons for 8,000 Unsullied." Missandei translated like a woman in a dream. Krasny's laughed, high and nasal, spittle bright on his lips. He agreed readily, greed rushing ahead of caution. The days that followed were a dance. The slavers thought her cornered by her own ambition. They thought a silver-haired girl with strange beasts could not possibly understand the long game of coin and power that had underpinned their city for generations. They thought dragons were worth far more than men, even the most obedient of men. Daenerys thought they were fools. On the morning of the exchange, the plaza boiled with bodies. Unsullied stood in their rigid ranks, spears risen in salute, signifying their transfer of allegiance. Slavers waited behind them, their faces shiny with sweat, their eyes bright. The air smelled of heat and old blood and anticipation. The dragons were restless. She refused to pen them. She would not see her children caged. Instead, they perched along the parapets of the surrounding buildings, wings half open, tails lashing. Their cries echoed off brick and stone, high and eerie. The slavers flinched but did not flee. Greed held them where fear might not. Krasny strutted like a rooster, an iron rod in his hand, the symbol of authority over the unsullied. He approached her with all the pomp of a king. "Khaleesi," Missandei said in a low voice. "He says you have made a wise bargain. He says he will be merciful and give you leave to keep your black beast." He held out the rod. Daenerys took it. The weight of it surprised her. Solid, heavy, cold, a symbol made steel. She felt the Unsullied's eyes pivot to her as if drawn by chains. "Now the dragons," Krasny's demanded. "The 8. She drew a breath. The plaza's heat pressed against her skin. 10 hearts beat around her, the steady drumming pulse of dragon life. "In High Valyrian," she said softly. "Tell him the truth." Missandei's eyes widened. "Khaleesi, in High Valyrian," Daenerys repeated, and glanced at her with a flick of warning. "Tell him that dragons are no slaves." Her tongue shaped the old words with a fluency honed in secret, listening at doors while Viserys muttered lists of kings and lineages. The sound of it felt like home and iron in her mouth. Krasny's blinked, taken aback. "What did she say?" he demanded in his own tongue, sharp and uncertain. "She says," Missandei answered, voice very clear, "that you are a fool, that you mistook her silence for ignorance, that you sold her an army and have no dragons at all." Confusion flickered across his face, quickly kindled into rage. He spat, shouting insults, lifting his rod as if to strike Daenerys. "Unsullied," he bellowed. "Strike this." "Dracarys," Daenerys said. 10 heads snapped toward her. 10 pairs of eyes, gold and green and amber and pale glass, fixed on the man who raised his hand against their mother. Fire answered, came in a torrent, a rush, a symphony. Drogon's flame was black at its heart, edged in orange, a thick rolling blast that hit Krasny's center mass and swallowed his scream. Rhaegal's was greener, Viserion's pale as molten gold. The others' flames interwove, tongues of red and white and blue-tinted fire meeting and devouring. Krasny's Emonaklas ceased to be a man and Bika. Miash, the colonnade behind him caught, its fluted columns blackening, carvings curling and bursting. Slavers scattered, shrieking, their silks catching spark. Unsullied did not move. They watched, spears held steady, as their masters burned. "Unsullied," Daenerys called. The iron rod was heavy in her hand. "Felt right. You were taken as boys. You were made into weapons and given no name but pain. I give you back your lives. I give you 3 things." They looked at her, thousands of faces as still as masks, and she felt their attention as a physical thing. "First," she said, "I give you freedom. No man owns you now. Not me, not any." The word tasted strange and sweet. "Second, I give you choice. You may leave this place, take what you have and go where you will. Or you may stay and stand with me. If you stay, you will fight, not as property, but as free men who have chosen their cause." A ripple ran through their ranks, a tremor in the spear points. "Third," she said, and lifted the rod high so that all could see. Flames licked around its tip, dragonfire hungry even for iron. "I give you a new name if you stay, not Unsullied, not slave. You will be the first legion of the new dominion. You will be the spear point that breaks chains from here to the ends of the earth. New dominion." Yora murmured behind her, tasting the words. She had not known she would speak them until they were out of her mouth. Yet as she said them, they seemed inevitable. 10 dragons wheeled overhead. 8,000 men watched her. Above them all, the sky waited. One by one, Spears thudded into the ground as men knelt. The sound rolled across the plaza like distant thunder. It echoed off the walls, off the nailed men's mute faces. It rose and fell as rank after rank went down on one knee, hands on their spear hafts, heads bowed. Daenerys Targaryen, last of her house, stood in the plaza of punishment with dragons screaming overhead and 8,000 kneeling men at her feet, and understood that something had changed beyond any easy undoing. Astapor fell. Yunkai opened its gates under dragon shadow. Meereen fought, stubborn and proud, and burned in places where its nobles defied her. But in the end, its great harpy toppled, dragged down by ropes held in freedmen's hands. She learned to use fear like a sword. A city that yielded quickly kept its walls and much of its wealth. A city that resisted felt dragonfire on its granaries, its slave pens, its palaces. Rumors ran ahead of her like whipped dogs. Some said she fed slavers to her dragons while she watched. Some said the dragons spoke in her dreams and guided her steps. Some said she was no woman at all but a vessel for some older, hungrier thing. She did little to stop such tales. Meereen became her seat. She walked the halls of brick palaces whose walls were frescoed with centuries of cruelty and ordered whole sections plastered over and repainted. She sat on a throne carved in the shape of a rearing dragon, brass and obsidian. Its wings spread behind her like a dark halo, and listened to petitions from all who wished to speak. She banned the buying and selling of human flesh within the borders of her rule. She declared that every child born under her banners would be free, that no man might be chained for debt, that floggings and mutilations for petty theft would be replaced with fines and service. She ordered that the whip be outlawed in training yards, that those who had been unsullied would now be paid. The old masters seethed. Some plotted and died for it. Sons of noble houses strapped knives beneath their robes and tried to reach her. Their bones fed her dragons. Others, more cautious, fled with what they could carry. Their riches turned to dust in their wake as dragonfire found their ships. Not all was triumph. The freed took freedom and found themselves adrift. Men who had known only the crack of a whip and the certainty of the next day's labor stared at open roads and empty fields and did not know how to fill the space. Some starved, proud and confused. Others fought their former masters in alleys, scores settling in blood. Crime blossomed like mold in damp corners. Her new laws stretched thin over old hatreds. The dragons grew. They outgrew their first yard, then their second. Walls that had seemed sufficient when they were the size of hounds crumbled beneath the weight of their wings as they stretched to the length of wagons. Their hunger grew with them. Herds vanished from fields. Goats bleated and stopped abruptly beneath their shadows. Once, a child vanished too. A tiny body crushed and charred when mare axes misjudged her landing in the market square. Daenerys stood over the smoldering ruin of a stall and listened to the wailing mother and tasted ash. "They are not tame," Yora said quietly at her shoulder. "No more than you are. They are mine," she said. But the words did not comfort her as they once had. She built them a great stone pit outside the city, wide as a field and deep as a canyon. Chains thicker than a man's wrist weighed down their collars when they came to sleep. They could still fly, still hunt, but at night the rattling music of metal around their necks echoed in her dreams. There were days, standing on the walls of Meereen and looking out over the patchwork of tents and lean-tos and newly built houses, when she felt the weight of what she had taken upon her shoulders like a cloak lined with lead. Astapor and Yunkai and Meereen, bound now beneath her banners, their harpies torn down and replaced with a three-headed dragon encircled by 10 stars, the sign of her growing dominion. Slaver's Bay, men had called this place. Her people had taken to calling it Dragon's Bay instead. It was not enough. The letters came across the sea. Varys' spies, Illyrio's agents, nameless sailors and merchants, each brought news from west. Eros, a boy king on a throne of knives, guided by his cruel mother and her cunning father, a realm fractured by war, lords carving it into personal fiefdoms. Another king at Dragonstone, burning gods on his beach and seeing victory in the flames. A third in the north, young and fierce, wolf banners snapping in the wind. 1,000 small folk crushed between them, beneath boots and taxes and sharpened steel. She held the letters in her hands, their scripts different, their contents alike in urgency. Come, they said, the realm bleeds. Come with your dragons and your freedmen and your harsh new justice. Come, if you would claim what is yours. Westeros, she said in the council chamber, the word rolling slow over her tongue. Her advisors sat around her, Yora, Grey Worm, Missandei, Dario Naharis with his insolent smile, Hisdar zo Lorak scowling into his cup. My father's kingdom, my brother's dream. You have a kingdom here, Hisdar protested. More than a kingdom, a dominion. You have remade Slaver's Bay. Why abandon it for a cold land that never wanted you? Because they will not leave us be, Yora said. Not forever. 10 dragons or 10,000, we cannot hold both shores unless we bind them. Every soul you free here will only call you breaker of chains so long as no one across the sea coins your name as usurper. When some other king finds the courage to look east and see dragons on the dawn, he will rally men behind him in the name of fear. Better to go as conqueror than wait as target. Grey Worm inclined his head. First Legion will follow you, he said. If Queen commands, we go. The Queen stays, we stay. But enemy will come. They always come. Missandei's gaze was thoughtful. You always meant for this to be a step, Khaleesi. You spoke of it in Karth. Essos first, then Westeros. Dominion across the world. The word hung in the air. Dominion, not mere rule. Shaping. Daenerys' fingers curled around the arm of her chair. She had carved an empire out of chains and ash. She had 10 dragons, each now the size of a small galley, their wings able to throw whole squares into shadow. She had men willing to die for her, not out of fear but because she had given them a name. She also had streets full of the hungry, fields not yet yielding enough grain, laws untested. If she left, what she had built might collapse. If she stayed, what she might build elsewhere would never be. In her dreams, lately, the wall loomed more often. An endless barrier of ice, its top lost in cloud, its face slick with old blue light. She saw shadows moving beyond it, pale and cold. She heard a sound like cracking glass, like a scream held too long. Fire and ice, she thought. The warlocks had shown her that in their dying. The dragons stirred restlessly in their sleep beyond the walls, chains clinking. Prepare the fleet, she said. A murmur circled the table. All of it. Dario leaned forward, braids slipping over his shoulder. You mean to take half the bay with you? I mean to take the first legion, she said, and the second if they will come. I mean to leave enough men to hold Meereen and Astapor and Yunkai, with leaders who remember what it is to wear a collar. I will take with me those who came to fight and build a new world, not those who wish only to keep what they have. You will take all your dragons, Hisdar said sharply. She met his gaze. Yes, without them you will have law, she said. You will have the memory of what they did to those who broke it. That will be enough. He swallowed his anger. He had learned by now that rage provided poor shelter under dragonfire. She rose, the decision settling in her bones like a stone in deep water. I am Daenerys Stormborn, she said. I have broken chains here. I will break others. This is the new Targaryen dominion. It does not end at this bay's ugly shores. Sails blossomed along Dragon's Bay like white flowers. The fleet gathered over weeks and months, ships drawn from each conquered city and built anew in Meereen's hastily expanded shipyards. Their hulls creaked under the weight of men, horses, supplies. Banners rippled from their masts, black and red and silver, stitched by freedwomen's fingers. The day she left, the city spilled to the quay to watch. Freedmen wept openly. Some knelt as her dragons passed overhead, hands lifted as if in prayer. Others stood with arms crossed, stern and unyielding, guardians of what she left behind. She felt every gaze like a weight as she boarded the flagship, Drogon's shadow falling over her. You could still change your mind, Yora said quietly. No, she said. If I never left, the world would still move. Men across the sea would still suffer under other names. My dragons would still grow, and their hunger would still need feeding. Better I choose where they turn their fire. The voyage to Westeros was nothing like the one from Karth. Then she had sailed as a supplicant, a beggar with strange pets and bold words. Now she sailed as a queen, her ships bristling with spears, her dragons gliding overhead like dark, impatient saints. Storms came, great green-mouthed things that tossed her ships until men knelt at the rails and prayed to any god who would listen. The dragons loved the storms. They rode the winds with wild abandon, diving through sheets of rain, lightning flashing blue-white along their wet scales. At night, when the waves were black glass and stars pricked the sky, she stood on the deck and watched the dragons chase one another in wide, looping arcs. Their fire painted brief portraits of the world in orange and gold. The spray from a breaking wave, the rigging's net, Yora's face lifted in wonder. "Do you think they know?" she asked once. "Know what?" Yora's breath steamed faintly in the chill. "Where we go? What waits?" She watched Drogon H. Over above the masthead, wings beating slow and powerful. "What we will ask of them." "They know you," he said. "That is enough." The first sight of Westeros was Dragonstone. Its black cliffs rose from the sea like the back of some slumbering beast, its towers jagged spikes against a gray sky. The weather was colder. Wind cut through her furs and set her teeth on edge. The water here was a different blue, darker, flecked with white. "An ill-omened rock," Dario muttered, squinting at the carved dragons that jutted from the castle's walls. "Looks half-sunk already." "It was my ancestor's seat," she said softly. "Before Aegon took the 7 kingdoms, he ruled from here. He dreamed of more than this rock." "Fitting," Yora said. "You come from the east as he did, with more dragons than he ever had. They found the castle garrisoned but weak. War elsewhere had drained it of its strongest men. When 10 dragons descended upon its walls, roaring, their fire skimming stone and making it weep, resistance crumbled with almost embarrassing speed. She walked its halls with footsteps echoing. Tapestries faded by salt and smoke lined the walls. Dragons embroidered in thread that had once gleamed, now dulled. In the high hall, the carved stone chairs of old Targaryen lords stood empty. She placed her hand upon one and closed her eyes. "Not this," she murmured. "Not yet." Dragonstone became a staging ground. Ravens flew from its rookery bearing the same message, copied and scribed in careful hands, sealed with black wax bearing the imprint of a 3-headed dragon surrounded by 10 stars. To the lords of Westeros it read, "Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of her name, Queen of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lady of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, and High Sovereign of the new Targaryen Dominion sends greetings and this proclamation. The wars that have torn this realm are the fruit of broken oaths and selfish kings. I offer you peace under new law. Bend the knee and swear me fealty. Free your small folk from bondage and swear to uphold my dominion's 10 statutes. In return you shall keep your lands and titles, and my dragons shall be your shield. Refuse, and you will see what I have done in the east." Some laughed, some cursed, some tore the letters in half and threw the pieces into their hearths. Others read them twice, 3 times, lips moving, eyes calculating. Far inland, at Harrenhal's broken towers, a band of river lords huddled around a fire, passing the letter from hand to hand. "She's mad," one said, fear sharpening his laugh. 10 statutes? 10 dragons? What nonsense! 10 dragons, another murmured, staring at the wax seal. "We've seen one. Stannis's man talked of one at the wall years ago." The man's scarred hand shook. "Seen one shadow. If this girl has 10. On the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy crumpled the letter and flung it from the cliffs. "Let the Kraken answer dragons," he snarled, and ordered ships made ready. In the north, where winter slept lightly beneath thin snow, a boy called King looked up at a raven from the wall, ice wind buffeting his cloak. Jon Snow's hands were numb as he took the letter. He read it with careful slowness, lips moving over the cramped script. His world had narrowed to cold and stone and the threat beyond the wall. The dead had begun to move in truth now, not only in tales. He had seen eyes like blue glass in faces that should not move. He had cut down friends whose bodies rose again, slow and jerking, in the snow. Dragons, he thought. 10. Fire enough to fight winter. He looked up at the endless white stretching north and felt a new weight settle in his chest. In King's Landing, under a sky choked with smoke from 100 chimneys, Cersei Lannister read the letter and laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. "Another pretender," she said, waving the parchment at her gathered council. "A little girl in love with her own titles, breaker of chains, dragons and dominions. We have walls and wildfire. Let her come." Tyrion Lannister watched, wine untouched, and did not laugh. He had heard stories from the east. Everyone had. The foolish exaggerated, but there was a shape beneath their tales like the shadow of some enormous beast moving beneath water. "She has dragons," he said slowly. 10, if the reports are true. "Reports from sailors and hedge knights," Cersei scoffed. "Men who see monsters in every wave. The last dragons died 100 years ago. And then there were eggs," Varys murmured. His soft voice barely disturbed the air. "And then there was a pyre and a girl who walked unburned. The world changes, Your Grace. The dead walk in the north. If half of what the Night's Watch cries is true, why not dragons in the east?" Cersei's smile faded, leaving something sharper. "You fear this girl," she said. "I respect what fire can do," Tyrion said. He thought of wildfire boiling the Blackwater. He thought of the whispers that she had burned cities for defiance. "Fire is not reasonable. It burns what's in its path." "Then we shall drown it," Cersei said. "The narrow sea is wide. Send word to the fleets. Every ship in the Royal Navy, every galley we can seize. Let them wait between Dragonstone and Blackwater Bay. We sank Stannis' hopes. We can sink hers." The sea between Dragonstone and the mainland turned black with sails. The royal fleet gathered, oars dipping in unison, banners rippling. Lions on crimson fields snapped in the wind. Captains muttered prayers, glancing west where the sun sank in a smear of orange. On Dragonstone's high cliffs, Daenerys watched them come. "They mean to box us in," Jorah said. "Starve us, bleed us. And if we push through, they will make us bleed at sea," Dario added. "Ships burn so prettily." Grey Worm stood with a RMS folded. "First Legion does not fear ships," he said, but his gaze on the distant sails was flat as stone. Daenerys' hand rested on the warm, ridged scales of Drogon's flank. He rumbled under her palm, tail twitching. "They have never fought dragons," she said. She could have flown over them. She could have taken her dragons and soared high above the narrow sea, letting the ships below fight the empty air while she went straight to King's Landing and made ash of its towers. The thought was sweet, tempting as ripe fruit. It would leave her men to die on the sea, abandoned. It would make her no better than any king who saw soldiers only as pieces to be flung from a board. "We break their fleet," she said instead. "We do it together." The battle on the narrow sea was like nothing Westeros had ever seen. The royal galleys rowed in tight formation, oars chopping the waves, rams glinting at their prows. Archers lined their decks, bows strung, torches ready to set flame to arrows tipped with pitch. Drummers beat time, deep and relentless, as the puppeteers of war tugged unseen strings. From Dragonstone, Daenerys' fleet rode to meet them. Their ships were fewer and lighter, built for speed and the shallow waters of Dragon's Bay. Men stood at their rails, spears and hooks ready for the crush of boarding. Their faces were a patchwork. Brown of the east, pale of the north, the sallow of men who'd spent too long below decks. Overhead, the dragons wheeled. They came at her call. 10 shadows against a gray sky, 10 throats loosing 10 roaring cries that rolled over the water like thunder. Arrows leapt up to meet them. Some bounced off scale, some found softer flesh. A shaft lodged in Syrax's wing membrane, She shrieked and wheeled away, blood pattering into the sea. Daenerys' heart clenched sharp. "Higher," she called, in the harsh tongue she had learned to use with them. Higher, then down. They rose as one, flapping hard, climbing until the ships below were toys. From that height, the sea was a dark mirror, the fleet's two ragged smears upon its surface. Wind tore at her hair as she clung to Drogon's back, legs snug against the curve of his spine. The harness she had made in Meereen, a cunning thing of leather and rings and dragonbone, creaked under the strain. She was no warrior born. She had not grown up in training yards, had not swung swords at armor dummies. But she had spent 100 nights learning the feel of weight and balance atop Drogon's back. She knew the play of muscle beneath scale, the shift of his wings before he banked. "Now," she whispered. They folded their wings and dropped. The world became wind and speed. The fleets rushed up to meet them, details resolving. The white faces of archers, the black mouths of open-deck hatches, the glint of metal. "Dracarys," she cried, and 10 dragons opened their throats. Fire fell. It lashed down in curtains and spears, in wide sweeping fans that raked decks from stem to stern. Pitch caught and bloomed, a dozen sudden suns flaring on the waves. Men shrieked and leapt overboard, their clothes afire. Masts toppled, sails crumbling to ash in midair. The neat lines of the royal fleet broke apart like toys kicked by a careless child. The sea itself seemed to burn. Flames raced across its surface where oil had spilled, licking at desperate hands. Smoke rolled up in massive, choking clouds, turning day to dusk. Daenerys guided her dragons through it. They rose from one run, circled back, dove again. Arrows whistled past her ears. A bolt from a scorpion engine cracked the air near Rhaegal's head. He jerked aside, the bolt plunging instead into some doomed galley's mast. Her ships drove forward in the confusion, rams striking, grapnels thrown. Men fought on slick, blood-wet decks, slipping in the mixture of seawater and oil and gore. The cries of dying men and horses rose like a grotesque chorus against the deeper rumble of dragon roars. It was terrible. It was glorious. It was what she had made her life into. When it was over, the narrow sea was a graveyard. Charred timbers floated amid bloated bodies, their armor dragging them slowly under. Here and there, a broken mast jutted from the water like a warning finger. Smoke drifted in low bands, stinging eyes. Her fleet had lost ships, men she knew would not rise again. She marked each loss inside herself like a cut. But the path to Blackwater Bay lay open. She did not go there at once. News came to her at sea, carried by a half-burned galley limping south. The captain's face was drawn as he knelt on her deck. "The dead, your grace," he gasped. "From the wall. The night's watch sends ravens, but the birds fall frozen. They say corpses walk. They say there are white shadows in the woods. They say Winterfell burns and the north bleeds and..." He swallowed. "They say dragons are the only hope left." The words should have been balm. Instead, they chilled her. In her dreams, the wall loomed larger each night. King's Landing could burn today or next year or 10 years hence. Its towers had stood through dynasties and madness and would not collapse of their own weight. The dead beyond the wall would not wait. They would not bend the knee. They would not sign statutes. "North," she told Jorah. He stared. "Your grace." "North," she repeated. "If the dead fall on this realm, what use is a throne to any man? If the winter the old tales speak of comes, and I have 10 dragons and do nothing, what sort of queen am I?" "A living one," Dario said dryly. "If you sail into the dark with 10 dragons, you may sail back with none. Or not at all," Jorah added more gently. "You cannot fight cold with fire alone. Not if half the tales of them are true." "Fire is all I have," she said. "Fire and men who chose me, not the other way around." She thought of Jon Snow's let. Tur, the one Varys' little birds had finally managed to bring from the wall, a rough, spare thing, written in a strong square hand. "We are dying up here," it said. "The dead do not tire. They do not fear. They do not turn aside. We can hold them only so long. If you have dragons, bring them. If you are real, she thought bitterly. She was as real as the ash in her hair, the scars on her skin, the weight of 10 lives bound to hers. Real as the dead he spoke of. North, she said for the 3rd time. We can burn a kingdom after we save it. The march from Winterfell to the wall was a wound in the land. She saw it from the air. Drogon glided low over fields churned to mud and frozen blood. Villages blasted apart, blackened shells of what had once been homes. Snow fell in lazy drifts, caught and disrupted by his wings. Behind her, the other dragons followed, a flock of fire in a sky grown iron gray. Below, a column of men and horses wound its way north. Banners flapped in the wind, their colors dulled by flurries. Wolves and dragons side by side, stags and krakens and lions scattered among them. Some had bent the knee to her on Dragonstone. Others had bent to necessity or fear. The army was a patchwork, stitched together by dread of what waited beyond that endless wall of ice. The wall rose before them like the end of the world. Even from the heights, its scale staggered her. It was not merely a barrier, but a cliff of frozen time, a palisade of centuries, its face streaked with blue, its top lost in blowing snow. Winds howled along its crown, carrying the faint, distant sounds of battle. Shapes moved upon it, tiny as ants from this height, clustered around wooden towers and the black gaps of gates. Others moved beyond it, in the pale expanse of white that stretched to the horizon. Some of those shapes did not move right. She saw them as the dragons circled, gaining a better vantage. Figures that jerked and shambled, wrong in their angles, their limbs stiff. Patches of darkness in the snow that were not shadow. Glints of blue. They are there, she whispered, her breath fogged in the frigid air, torn away by the wind. Drogon rumbled. She felt his unease in the tensing of muscle under her thighs. A horn sounded below, its mournful note rising thrice. The gates at the foot of the wall creaked open, spilling men out onto the churned, frozen ground. Black cloaks snapped in the wind. At their head rode a man in a plain leather jerkin under a cloak thick with frost. His hair was black, his face lean and tired, his eyes dark hollows. He rode as if born to the saddle but wearier than any man his age had right to be. Jon Snow. She had never seen him before, but she knew him. He looked up as the dragon shadow fell over him. For a moment, their eyes met across the impossible distance. Hers amethyst, his dark. Something twisted in her chest, some wordless recognition. He slid from his horse and dropped to one knee, snow puffing around him. "Your Grace," he shouted, voice raw. "You came." She wondered what he had expected. Some raving invader with ash in her hair and blood in her teeth? Some child playing at war, clutching chains? Some mirage conjured by his own desperation? "I did," she called back, but the wind snatched the words away. They met on the frozen ground. Dragons crouched restlessly behind her. The wall loomed, throwing an immense blue shadow. His first words were not of fealty or legitimacy or crowns. They were of numbers. "They have at least 10,000 corpses moving with them," he said, voice clipped, forcing itself steady. "Maybe more. Every man they kill rises in their ranks. They do not tire. They don't feel the cold. Fire stops them, but not always enough, not always all. There are others with them, the White Walkers." The words came out like a curse. "They make the dead. We've killed one, with dragonglass and with Valyrian steel. It shatters them like ice." He looked past her to the dragons. They hissed at him, nostrils flaring, tasting old blood and fear on the air. "Fire hurt them," he said. "We saw that. There's never been enough of it." "There is now," she said. There was no time for long counsel. The dead were moving. They came as twilight bled into night, a vast pale tide sliding over the snow. No war horn sounded for them. No drums beat. The only herald of their approach was the wind, cold enough to burn, and the crackle of ice freezing in suddenly stiff banners. She saw them first from above, the army of the dead, stretched from one horizon to the other. Men and women and children, animals with milky eyes, twisted things that might once have been giants. Their faces were white and slack, their mouths open, breathless. Their armor was rusted, their weapons dull, but they did not care. They did not feel. They moved toward the living host with the inevitability of a glacier sliding down a mountain. Among them rode taller shadows, slim, pale, in armor that shone with a strange, dark light. Their eyes were the blue of deepest winter. The White Walkers, others the old tales named them. One lifted its head as her dragons shrieked overhead. Their gazes met across the frozen air, and in that blue she saw a will as implacable as death itself. It lifted a spear of something like crystalline glass, and a white mist swirled around its hand. "Now," she whispered, the dragon's dove. Fire met ice. Heat blasted out in waves as 10 throats belched dragon flame toward the advancing dead. The front ranks of corpses blackened and fell, their frozen flesh cracking and bursting. The snow itself melted in steaming, filthy pools. The walkers moved, graceful amid the ruin, raising their spears. One cast his weapon with eerie calm. It flew through the air with unnatural speed, trailing a wake of hoarfrost. Syrax jerked as it struck her flank. Her scree, and ripped the sky. She faltered, wings beating erratically, and spun away trailing blood like rubies in the air. Daenerys choked back a cry. She forced herself to stay focused, to guide Drogon's swoop, his blast of fire. He roared as flame poured from his jaws, hotter and brighter than any she had seen from him before, driven by her own fury. Where that flame touched walkers, their armor ran like wax, their pale bodies cracked. They shrieked, a sound like shattering ice, and collapsed into heaps of hoarfrost and drifting snow. The dead surged around the burning gaps, heedless, stepping over their fallen, hands clawing. They flung themselves at the wall's gate and the ragged line of living men in front of it. Swords swung, axes rose and fell, arrows hissed. Men screamed and died and rose again if flame did not take them quickly. Dragonfire carved lanes through the tide. Again and again, Daenerys cried Dracarys, until her voice was a ragged thread. Again and again, dragons answered, swooping, belching fire, ascending before ice spears could reach them. The air became a lethal web of heat and cold. On the ground, Jon Snow fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. He wielded a dark, rippled blade that seemed to drink what little light remained, the Valyrian steel sword he had taken from his father in all but name. It cleaved dead flesh and living with equal ease. When a walker strode through the chaos toward him, its spear raised, Jon met it blade to blade. Sparks flew where their weapons kissed. Frost rimed his hair in moments, his breath freezing on his skin. He gritted his teeth and drove the dark sword down, shattering the creature's breastplate. It screamed as it cracked, fragments of ice cascading from its form. The battle raged in a blur. Dragons fell from the sky and rose again. Mare axes crashed into a knot of dead giants, her weight crushing them, her fire turning their frozen barrels of muscle into exploding steam. Caraxes took a spear through the wing and fought on, his flight lopsided, his rage undimmed. Vagor vanished for a terrible few minutes into a whirling blizzard the walkers conjured, reappearing low and limping, a hind leg dragging. Syrax did not rise again. She slammed into the ground near the foot of the wall, broken and still, her blood cracking into violet-black shards on the snow. The dead swarmed over her body until Regal and Viserion came shrieking down and washed them away in a torrent of fire. Daenerys saw her child still form through a haze of tears and rage. "Burn them," she whispered into Drogon's neck. "Burn them all." She did not know how long it lasted. Time lost meaning in the chaos of heat and cold, scream and shriek. At some point her voice failed entirely. She gave up speaking and simply thought the command, willing fire into being. Whether the dragons heard her mind or her hoarse gasps did not matter. They burned. The turning point, if there was one, came when the largest of the walkers stepped forward. It was taller than the rest, its armor filigreed with frost that caught what little light remained and scattered it. Its eyes were a deeper, darker blue. It raised both hands, and the corpses around it stilled for a heartbeat, then surged forward as one, a wave breaking. Ice bloomed up Drogon's flanks as the walker's power reached for him. She felt it like knives along her skin, piercing cold that sank bone deep. Drogon faltered, his wings seizing, his fire guttering. "No," she hissed. She reached not outward but inward, groping for that molten core she had felt on the night of the pyre, when flames had licked her and found her inviolable. She found it small, hard, pulsing. She flung it outward along the line of her bond with him, pouring heat into him, into all of them. Fire raced down her veins, searing. For a heartbeat she thought she would burn herself from the inside out. Then Drogon roared, a sound that shook the sky. He flung himself at the walker. Flame burst from his jaws, whiter than before, edged in blue. It struck the creature like a tidal wave, engulfing it. For a heartbeat, in the heart of that blaze, she saw its silhouette, arms raised, eyes wide with something like surprise. Then it shattered, 1,000 shards of ice carried on a gust of wind. Every corpse it had raised shuddered. They froze mid-step, mid-blow, mid-scream. For a heartbeat, they were grotesque statues, their faces slack and pale. Then, as if a single string had been cut, they collapsed. An army of puppets with their cords severed, falling soundlessly into the snow. Silence fell, sudden and shocking. Only the crackle of lingering flames broke it, and the harsh, ragged breaths of the living. Drogon's wings beat raggedly. He climbed, circling once before gliding down toward the ground. Daenerys clung to his neck, trembling, every muscle shaking with exhaustion. Her skin felt flayed, raw from the inside. She was distantly aware of the other dragons landing. Regal limping, Viserion with one wing torn, the others speckled with burns and frostbite. The snow was churned to red mud beneath his claws as he settled. Men staggered away from him, then dropped to their knees, too weary to fear properly. Jon Snow stood amid the bodies of the dead, now truly dead, his dark sword point down in the ground, his hands resting on the pommel. His cloak hung in tatters. Blood, others and his own, streaked his face. Frost rimed his lashes. He looked up at her and laughed, a short, incredulous sound that bubbled up from somewhere deep and exhausted. "You are real," he said. "So are you," she managed, voice a rough whisper. They were too tired for long speeches, too drained for the careful dance of politics. Men around them wept openly, sank to their knees and prayed, stared dumbly at the heaps of unmoving corpses that minutes before had been nightmare. The wall stood, T.S. blue face streaked now with soot from dragon flame. The land beyond it was a charred, churned waste. But the army of the dead was broken. Whatever power had woven them had been undone. In the days that followed, they burned the corpses until the snow melted in great, dirty pools. They patrolled the woods for lingering pockets of dead that had been out of reach of the walkers when they died, hunting them like wolves. They buried their own with what honors they could afford in the frozen ground. News of what had happened traveled south, carried by ravens and men with haunted eyes. Some called it a miracle. Some called it the end of the world. Some called it the first time in living memory that all the realm's great houses had stood together, however uneasily, against a common foe. Daenerys stood on the top of the wall one morning, wrapped in furs, watching the pale sun struggle through thin clouds. Drogon sprawled nearby, tail hanging over the edge, steam rising faintly from his nostrils. Regal and Viserion lay together a little way off, wings overlapping like sheltering hands. The others were scattered across the castle below, their shapes strange and dark against the frost. "Cold," she muttered. Jon Snow chuckled quietly beside her. "You should see it in deep winter." "I think I have seen enough," she said. "Of winter, of death." He sobered, his gaze drifting north. "They'll tell stories of this," he said. "Of what you did, of what they did. He nodded toward the dragons. But south, they will start their old games again. They always do. Yes, she said. There are always more chains. He glanced at her. Will you break them? She thought of cities in ashes, of men kneeling, of statutes written in careful ink and lives that did not line up with their neat, tidy lines. She thought of 10 dragons, now 8. The dead Syrax and another who had fallen in some nameless skirmish in the long night. For the dead did not give up without cost. She thought of a dominion that spanned seas and laws that bound where chains once did, of men who would chafe under even just rule because men did. I will try, she said simply, but not alone. Thrones are chairs men fight to die upon. Sir, Lord, Jon Snow, I would see something different in their place. Such as, his breath steamed in the cold. Councils, she said, assemblies, laws that do not bend beneath gold or name. A realm where a man can be king of his own hearth, if not of anyone else's life. She smiled wryly. And dragons watching, so those who sit in chairs remember they are not gods. A dominion of law, he said, and fear. Of awe, she corrected softly. Fear fades. Awe changes the stories men tell their children. He studied her, the wind tugging at his hair. You may find, he said slowly, that chains are easier to break than habits, that men will kneel to dragons and call it freedom, and you will have to decide whether you believe them. I know, she said. That is why I will need men beside me who remember cold, who remember what we nearly lost. Men like me, he said. If you will, she replied. He looked south. The land spread out beyond the wall in a patchwork of forest and field and town, already adjusting, already beginning the slow, inexorable creep back toward the old games. Very well, Jon Snow said. Queen of the new dominion, let us see if we can build a world worth saving from the dark. She extended her hand. He took it, his grip firm and cold. Below them, dragons stirred. Their shadows spilled over the wall, long and dark, stretching southward toward a realm that had not asked for them and could no longer imagine itself without them. Daenerys Targaryen stood between fire and ice, between old thrones and new dominions, and felt the weight of history on her bare, unburnt shoulders. Her dragons were not tame, neither was she, but the world had seen what they could do when they chose to burn, and had lived. Now, she thought, as Drogon lifted his head and the first sliver of sun broke free of the clouds, now we teach it what we can do when we choose to build.